They came without warning. The colony on Sigma-9 was supposed to be safe. A backwater outpost, unimportant in the grand scheme of the galaxy. No military significance, no valuable resources. Just a settlement of 80,000 humans, living quiet, ordinary lives on the edges of known space. Then the YVRE came. It started with the orbital bombardment. Glassfire missiles rained down from the sky, turning cities into molten wastelands in minutes. Entire districts burned, their screams lost beneath the roar of destruction. Then the ground forces arrived. Monstrous creatures standing 8 feet tall, their insectoid limbs razor-sharp. Their black armor shimmered in the dim light of Sigma-9's twin suns. They carried weapons forged from nightmare, projectiles that didn't just pierce flesh but unmade it. The humans had no chance. Within 6 hours the colony was gone. But there were survivors. And one of them was the most dangerous human alive. The secret weapon. Sergeant Dane Carter had seen war before. He had fought in the Terran Wars, survived the uprising on Epsilon Prime, and led Black Ops missions deep into enemy space. But none of that prepared him for this. Because this wasn't a war. It was extermination. He crouched in the ruins of a collapsed building, blood seeping from a deep gash in his side. His rifle had 1 magazine left. His team? Dead. Except for her. Lieutenant Mira Vasquez, Sigma-9's chief engineer. The only reason Dane hadn't bled out yet. She pressed a hand to his wound, her dark eyes locked onto his. "We need to move," she whispered. "Now." Dane exhaled sharply. "Move where?" "They've got air patrols. They've got thermal scans. We can't hide." Myra's lips pressed into a grim line. "Then we don't hide." Dane frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small black device, no bigger than a human palm. It pulsed with a faint, eerie blue light. "This," she said, "is why they're here." Dane's breath caught. "Explain." Mira hesitated. Then, in a whisper, "I built it." The tech that shouldn't exist. The device hummed softly in Myra's hands, casting faint blue shadows against the ruins around them. "What is it?" Dane asked. Myra's fingers tightened around it. "It's a prototype. A technology Earth wasn't supposed to develop for another 100 years. Dane's gut twisted. "Then how the hell do you have it?" She hesitated. "I didn't make it from scratch. I found it in the wreckage of an old ship." Dane's mind raced. "What kind of ship?" Mira swallowed. "Not human." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The distant sound of YVRE patrols clawing through rubble echoed in the night. Dane exhaled. "You built something from alien tech. And now the YVRE are here to take it." Mira nodded. Dane's hands clenched into fists. The YVRE didn't invade planets for resources. They didn't care about conquest. They erased species that threatened them. And now, thanks to this device, humanity had become a threat. "We have to destroy it," he said. Mira flinched. "I can't." Dane narrowed his eyes. "Why?" She hesitated. "Then. Because it's already activated." Hunted like animals. The night sky screamed as YVRE gunships roared overhead, their searchlights piercing through the ruins. Dane and Mira ran. They darted through the skeletal remains of Sigma-9's once thriving city, their breaths ragged, their bodies on the edge of collapse. Behind them the hunters came. Dane could hear the skittering of their limbs, the clicking of mandibles, the guttural, bone-chilling growls of creatures bred for one purpose, to kill. "We won't outrun them," Mira panted. Dane scanned the wreckage ahead. There, an old maintenance tunnel leading underground. "Move," he barked. They slid into the tunnel just as a plasma blast vaporized the wall behind them. Heat scorched their backs, but they kept running deeper and deeper into the dark. The tunnel stretched on for miles, a forgotten part of the colony's infrastructure. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it bought them time. Dane grabbed Mira by the shoulders. "Tell me everything. Now." She took a shaky breath. "The device, it's a disruptor." Dane's stomach dropped. "What kind of disruptor?" Mira hesitated. "Then. One that rewrites physical laws." For a second, Dane thought he misheard her. But the look in her eyes told him he hadn't. His voice was barely a whisper. "You built a goddamn reality weapon?" Mira swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to." Dane ran a hand through his blood-stained hair. "This wasn't just classified tech. This wasn't just something that could win a war. This was extinction level. And the YVRE wanted it. At any cost. Nowhere left to run." A low growl echoed through the tunnel. Dane's heart stopped. The YVRE had found them. A sharp clack sound filled the air as the creatures crawled along the tunnel walls, their elongated limbs digging into the metal. Mira froze in terror. Dane raised his rifle. One magazine left. He exhaled. This was it. "Get behind me," he whispered. Mira hesitated. "Dane. Now." The first YVRE lunged from the darkness. Dane fired. The creature's skull snapped back as the round tore through its exoskeleton. It crashed to the ground, screeching in pain. Another leapt forward. Dane fired again, click. Out of ammo. The YVRE slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. Razor-sharp claws sliced across his chest, sending ribbons of blood spraying into the dirt. Mira screamed. Dane gritted his teeth, bracing for the killing blow. And then, the device in Myra's hands flared with blinding blue light. The YVRE froze. The tunnel shook. Dane felt something in the air, an impossible shift. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend around them. And then, the YVRE were gone. Not dead. Not vaporized. Gone. As if they had never existed. Dane lay there, panting, staring at Mira. Her hands trembled. The device pulsed softly. I didn't know it could do that," she whispered. Dane pushed himself up, wincing. "What the hell did you just do?" Mira looked at him. And in that moment, Dane realized something far worse than the YVRE invasion. Mira Vasquez hadn't just built a weapon. She had built something that could erase anything from existence itself. And if the YVRE wanted it this badly, that meant something even worse was coming. An impossible escape. Dane's hands were slick with blood. His own, the YVRE's, and maybe even something worse. The tunnel was silent. Too silent. The YVRE were gone, erased from existence by the impossible weapon Mira Vasquez had built. And now, the device in her trembling hands pulsed, its eerie blue glow casting long, unnatural shadows against the walls. Dane forced himself to his feet, his breath ragged. "What the hell did you do?" Mira didn't answer. She couldn't. She just stared at the device, like even she didn't understand what it had become. Dane grabbed her shoulder. "Mira, focus. Where did they go?" She blinked, shaking herself out of her daze. I don't know. Did you kill them?" Her lips parted. "No. That wasn't a weapon strike. It was a displacement event." Dane clenched his jaw. "Displacement?" Mira swallowed hard. "They weren't destroyed, Dane. They were moved. Somewhere else." Dane felt ice settle in his gut. "Where?" Myra's voice was barely a whisper. "I have no idea. Nowhere is safe." They ran. The tunnel stretched beneath the ruins of Sigma-9, a network of forgotten maintenance shafts built long before the colony had expanded. If they could reach the southern exit, they might have a chance of reaching the old spaceport. If any ships were still intact. If the YVRE weren't waiting for them. If they even had a plan after that. Dane was running on instinct now, his rifle empty but still clutched in his hands. He had no ammo left, but if they ran into another YVRE, he'd beat the thing to death if he had to. Beside him, Mira moved fast, but not like a soldier. She was an engineer, a scientist, not a killer. Her breath was ragged, her arms clutching the alien device to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Maybe it was. The tunnel twisted left. Then right. Then a dead end. Mira stumbled to a halt, gasping. No. Dane's heart pounded. He turned, eyes sweeping the shadows behind them. The tunnel was too dark. Too quiet. And that's when he heard it. A low hum. Faint at first. But growing. Not YVRE. Not anything he had ever heard before. Dane tensed. "Mira?" She turned, her face pale. She heard it too. The sound wasn't coming from behind them. It was coming from the walls. The real enemy. The metal shimmered. The tunnel walls flickered, like a broken hologram, as if reality itself was struggling to hold together. Mira stepped back, shaking her head. No, this isn't possible." Dane raised his empty rifle on instinct. "Talk to me." Mira gripped the device tighter. "This isn't the YVRE." Dane kept his eyes locked on the shifting walls. "Then what the hell is it?" She swallowed. "Something bigger." Then the tunnel ripped open. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't an attack. It was a doorway. A hole in reality itself, opening in front of them like a gaping wound in the fabric of existence. Dane's breath caught. Through the tear he saw something. Dark. Endless. Wrong. And then, they stepped through. Not YVRE. Something else. Something older. Something that had been waiting. Dane didn't need Mira to explain. He already knew. The YVRE hadn't come to Sigma-9 to conquer humanity. They had come to stop this. To stop whatever was coming through that tear. And now, it was too late. Something worse than death. They weren't soldiers. They weren't even biological. Dane had faced death before. He had fought killers, monsters, things that shouldn't exist. But these things weren't just alive. They were rewriting reality as they moved. Their bodies were liquid, shifting between shapes that defied physics, their forms flickering between dimensions like they weren't bound by the same rules as the rest of existence. And worst of all, they knew Dane was watching. One of them turned its head, if it could even be called a head. Its featureless black form rippled, shifting into something almost human but not quite. Then it spoke. Not in words. In thoughts. We were bound. Now we are free. Dane's blood turned to ice. Mira let out a choked gasp, stepping back. Oh God. Dane gritted his teeth. Mira. What the hell did you let out? She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know. The thing took a step closer. The tunnel groaned as its presence distorted space, warping the metal like clay. You cannot stop us. Dane's mind screamed as something pressed against his thoughts. A presence, vast and unknowable. Then, Mira did something insane. She raised the device. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the creature stepped back. Dane's pulse spiked. Was afraid. Now or never. Myra's hands trembled as she gripped the device. Dane, she whispered, I think this thing isn't just a weapon. Dane kept his eyes on the shifting horrors before them. Then what is it? Her voice wavered. A lock. Dane's stomach dropped. And suddenly everything made sense. The YVRE hadn't come to Sigma-9 to steal the device. They had come to contain it. Because it wasn't just an invention. It was a prison key. A key Mira had accidentally turned. And now, the things inside? They were free. Dane clenched his jaw. Can you shut it? Myra's hands tightened around the device. I don't know. But I have to try. Dane nodded once. Decision made. Mira. She looked at him. If this doesn't work? He pulled the combat knife from his belt, his last weapon, his last line of defense. We don't run. Mira swallowed hard. We fight. Dane exhaled. Damn right. Then Mira activated the device. And the universe tore apart. The end of the beginning. Dane felt it first. Not the pain, not yet. Not the terror. Not the crushing weight of something going terribly, cosmically wrong. He felt the silence. 1 second, the underground tunnel was shaking, the air thrumming with the unnatural, mind-breaking presence of the entities, the creatures Mira had accidentally freed. The next, everything was gone. No sound. No movement. No air. No rules. Then the pain came. Dane's body folded in on itself, his limbs twisting, snapping apart and reforming in ways they shouldn't. His vision fractured as if he were seeing too many versions of himself at once. He was somewhere else now. No, not just somewhere. Someone. Trapped between realities. And Mira was screaming. Lost in the rift. Dane hit the ground hard. His lungs refused to breathe. His blood felt like liquid metal, his bones humming with a vibration he couldn't understand. The world around him was wrong. No sky. No ground. Just an endless, shifting void filled with floating wreckage of ships, buildings, entire cities. And through it all the entities moved. Dane's head pounded. Mira? She was on her knees, clutching the device, her face twisted in agony. Blue light crackled around her, the pulse of the machine out of control. I can't shut it down, she gasped. Dane's hands clenched into fists. You have to. No. Myra's breath hitched. Dane. This place, it's not just a pocket dimension. It's not just a rift. Dane turned, heart hammering. Then what the hell is it? Myra's voice shook. It's a battlefield. The war that never ended. Dane's mind reeled as he scanned the impossible landscape. The floating wreckage? They weren't just ruins. They were weapons. Ships that weren't human. Not YVRE. Not even anything recorded in the archives of the Galactic Council. Some of them looked ancient. Others looked unfinished, as if abandoned mid-construction. And all of them were dead. Dane's gut twisted. What the hell happened here? Myra's fingers danced over the device. I think this is where the entities were trapped. Someone fought them. Someone powerful. Dane exhaled. And they lost. Mira swallowed. Yeah. Then the entities moved. No way out. The largest one, the first that had spoken, rose from the void, shifting and bending as it solidified into a monstrous form. It had no face, yet Dane could feel it looking at him. You are intruders. Mira gritted her teeth, struggling to hold the machine steady. Dane. We have to leave. Now. Dane gripped his combat knife, useless against whatever the hell this was. But he wasn't going down without a fight. I'm open to ideas. Mira pressed something on the device. The blue energy flared. The void shook. The largest entity lurched backward, its form distorting, unraveling. Myra's eyes widened. It's working. Dane's heart pounded. Then do it again. Mira adjusted the settings, fingers moving fast. If I can reset the lock, I might be able to. The entity roared. The sound wasn't sound, it was thoughts breaking apart, memories unraveling. Dane's vision splintered. He saw things that weren't real. Himself dying 1,000 different ways. Mira screaming in a timeline where she never built the device. The YVRE winning. The YVRE losing. The YVRE never existing. Dane bit down on his own tongue, forcing himself to focus. Mira kept working. The device burned white-hot in her hands. And then, the entire rift began to collapse. Escape or die trying. Dane grabbed Myra's arm. We need an exit. Now. Myra's hands were shaking, the device sparking as energy arced off of it. I don't know if I can. Dane shook her. Mira. She sucked in a sharp breath. Then, she slammed her hand on the reset switch. The universe fractured. The void collapsed. And everything went white. Back to reality. Maybe. Dane woke up gasping. Cold air burned his lungs. He was lying on solid ground, his back pressed against metal. For a split second he thought, we made it. Then he saw the sky. And his stomach dropped. Sigma-9 was gone. No ruins. No cities. Just an empty wasteland stretching for miles. Mira groaned beside him, the device still clutched in her hands. Her knuckles were white. Dane swallowed hard. Mira. She didn't answer. Because she was staring at the horizon. Dane turned, following her gaze. And that's when he saw it. The YVRE fleet. Hundreds of warships descending from the sky. But they weren't attacking. They weren't here to finish the invasion. They were running. And behind them, the entities were coming. And this time, they were bringing the war with them. No more running. Dane forced himself to move. His body screamed in protest, but he didn't have time to care. The sky was burning, the air thrumming with the raw energy of the entities descending. Mira was still on her knees, clutching the device. Her knuckles were bone white. The YVRE fleet was in full retreat. And the things hunting them? They weren't stopping. Dane's throat went dry. This wasn't a battle. This was an extermination. And Earth was next. The YVRE's secret. A thunderous shockwave tore through the atmosphere as the first YVRE ships disintegrated mid-air. Not exploded. Not shot down. Unmade. Dane could see it now, how the entities fought. They didn't use weapons. They rewrote physics itself. Reality around the warships bent and twisted like wet paper, the hulls of the vessels stretching and folding before simply vanishing. Dane clenched his fists. We need to move. Now. Mira barely looked at him. Move where? Dane turned. His heart stopped. Because something was coming straight at them. A YVRE drop pod, fired from one of the burning warships, its outer plating glowing from the heat of re-entry. Dane grabbed Mira, yanking her aside as the pod slammed into the earth. Metal shrieked. Steam billowed. The ground shook. And from the wreckage a figure emerged. Not human. YVRE. Tall. Armored in a shimmering, biomechanical exosuit. Their 4 arms flexed as they scanned the battlefield. Then their gaze locked onto Dane and Mira. A voice, harsh, mechanical, but unmistakably alive. You fools. Myra's breath caught. The YVRE warrior stepped forward, one of their arms raising a plasma blade. You have doomed us all. The enemy of my enemy. Dane raised his knife. It was pointless, but he wasn't going down without a fight. The YVRE warrior studied him, then scoffed. You think I came to kill you? Dane narrowed his eyes. That's usually how this works. The warrior didn't smile. Didn't blink. I came to make sure you fix your mistake. Mira flinched. You mean the device? Yes. The YVRE stepped closer. No fear. No hesitation. You released them. Now you will put them back. Mira shook her head. I don't know how. I barely managed to close the portal before it collapsed. The YVRE reached out, grabbing the device from her hands in one swift motion. Mira gasped. Hey. The warrior ignored her, studying the machine with something Dane had never seen in YVRE before. Desperation. This was never a weapon, they muttered. It was a seal. An ancient technology, not ours. Not yours. Dane's gut twisted. Then whose? The YVRE warrior looked up, and behind them the sky split open. The gods of the void. Dane's body locked up. He had seen horrors before. He had fought against impossible odds. But this wasn't a battle. This was the end of everything. Through the rift the entities poured in. No longer distant, no longer formless. They had grown stronger. More real. And the largest of them, the one that had spoken before, was no longer just a shifting shape in the dark. It had taken form. A colossal, titanic being, its body a mass of writhing black tendrils and burning stars, its very presence erasing the ground beneath it. It was not a creature. It was a god. And it had come to finish what it started. One last chance. The YVRE warrior moved fast. They shoved the device back into Myra's hands. It's still connected. The lock is broken, but the mechanism is intact. Myra's fingers trembled. I don't know what to do. The warrior's voice was firm. Then learn. Or we all die. Dane gritted his teeth. He looked at Myra. She was shaking. But she wasn't giving up. She adjusted the device, fingers flying across the controls. Thinking. Calculating. The entity turned its gaze toward them. And the world broke apart. The choice. The ground fractured. The air shattered like glass. Myra let out a sharp breath. Dane, I have an idea. Dane's hands tightened into fists. Make it work. Myra's voice was deadly calm. I can't reseal them. But I can destroy the lock. Dane's stomach dropped. That means? Yes. Myra's eyes burned with determination. We won't be able to close the door. But if we do this right, we'll pull them in. Every last one. Dane nodded. The YVRE warrior tensed. That's suicide. Myra took a breath. Then help us make it count. The final stand. The entity lashed out. Reality warped. The air turned to liquid. The sky burned with darkness. Myra activated the device. A pulse of energy erupted, slamming into the entity, tearing into its form. The god screamed. For the first time. For the last time. The YVRE warrior charged forward, plasma blade igniting. Dane followed. No fear. No hesitation. This was it. The war ends. The world became light. Then darkness. Then silence. Epilogue. A story not yet over. Dane woke up to the sound of wind. Cold air rushed over him. The scent of burning metal. He opened his eyes. Sigma-9 was gone. The war was over. Myra was beside him breathing, but barely. The device was gone. The YVRE warrior? Dead. The sky was clear. No entities. No more war. They had done it. But at what cost? Myra coughed, her voice weak. We survived. Dane exhaled. Looks like it. She gave a small, tired laugh. That's a first. Dane smirked. Hell of a story. Myra turned her head. Think anyone will believe it? Dane sat back, staring at the empty horizon. No. Then he looked at the sky. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. The end. But the fight never stops. Subscribe to the Void Narratives for more stories like this.